The East Baton Rouge Parish Library believes that a thriving business community is good for us all. That's why we help entrepreneurs start businesses with tools like Gale Business Builder. Keep commerce rolling by providing access to computers, printers, and free Wi-Fi at 14 branch locations. Get a library card. Grow your business at ebrpl.com/business.
Started making beer at home and immediately fell in love with it. After just like the day of my first batch of brewing, I was already thinking, can I do this for a living?
Oh yeah, obsessed with it. He was totally consumed by it, and then looked at me one day and told me I was put on this earth to brew beer. And I was like, wow, that is such a bold statement. And if you can say that about anything, then you need to follow your dream and do it.
Hello, and welcome to Strictly Business, powered by Baton Rouge Business Report. I'm your host, J.R. Ball. Joining us today is Rev CEO Josh Descant, and we'll be exploring the company's 2022 rebranding campaign that shifted three well-established entities in their respective market, RTC, eTel, and Vision Communications, under the singular brand of Rev. That move, in part, came following the 2019 acquisition that put the three companies under the same corporate umbrella. Not only will you learn the inside details of the rebranding strategy and its execution, but Josh will also offer tips to companies considering a rebranding initiative of their own. Now, we want to keep Strictly Business as interactive as possible, so for those joining us live, we have an icebreaker question for you. Submit your vote in the comments and wait until the end of the webcast to see the results. Finally, today's episode of Strictly Business is brought to you by the East Baton Rouge Parish Library and Home Bank, and I'd like to thank both of them for their support. Josh, welcome. It's great to have you join us today. Let's begin with, why was the rebranding decision made? Was it as simple as wanting to bring what had been for decades three distinct telecommunication companies under a singular name?
Well, JR, thank you for having me. It's a real pleasure to be here. Essentially, yes. I mean, it was about bringing three companies together under one brand. I guess there's really, two things that we were very focused on, and sort of the reasoning behind why this was the right time. The first being operational, and the second more about the strategic direction of the business. From an operational standpoint, look, we now cover 9 parishes with our network. Right, those parishes are contiguous across Southeast Louisiana. We have 2 segments within those 9 parishes, both on the business and residential services side of the house. So, and then plus growing and expanding. So, what we found is, because of that contiguous footprint operationally, it was becoming a real challenge, and in some ways incoherent in the market, to try to present ourselves in a way that customers were very clear, as to who we were as a total combined entity. Strategically, and look, this is something we've talked about for a very, very long time, even dating back to eTel, is we had telecommunications in our name, right? eTel being East Ascension Telephone, RTC, Reserve Telecommunications Company, and even Vision Communications in its history was about the telephone business. And that's still, communications is still very much at the core of the business, but it's been a long time since we've really brought more value to the market than just telecommunications, right? Both in the form of the broadband business, video business, and the like. So really, for those 2 reasons, that was sort of the driving factor behind, now's the time to take those 3 businesses under one combined brand.
And as you mentioned, all 3 companies already had long established ties and a strong market presence in the communities in which each of them served. So was there any concern about introducing change into the marketplace, and how maybe the consumer would handle it? It was like, hey, I'm used to eTel. What is this Rev thing?
Yeah, of course. No, you're spot on. And eTel's a good example. We definitely had concerns, and we went in, eyes wide open, knowing that, look, in our case, we were rebranding not to run from a problem in the business or the brand that we needed to distance ourselves from. In fact, there's a lot of value and equity there for many, many decades that we wanted to carry forward. So But look, I also believe that, you got to make some bold moves in business, strategically. And with that comes risk. And there needs to be a risk reward consideration in terms of how we're going to balance that. We knew it might be, risky in many ways in terms of people associating very positively, the three prior brands. And so we needed to compensate for that and really think about that in our brand messaging and how we were going to carry this forward. The other aspect was a little bit beyond just the brand equity and recognition is, we are local. And so, and we continue to be locally owned in Louisiana. We operate with our employees at the local level across 3 regions in those 9 parishes I mentioned. And we needed to maintain that and carry it forward in a way that was, again, coherent to our customers. They understood and believed. So when the name changes, right, there can be some disassociations or some misunderstandings. And so certainly there was that concern, particularly, look, all 3 of these businesses were founded in the 1930s. And so you're talking many decades of positive brand affinity that yes, we took quite seriously from a risk reward standpoint and how we approach this.
So as we start to go inside and look a little bit more at the details of all this, can you sort of talk about the process that led up to the rebranding decision, and really how is it that, it makes sense now, Rev, it's the first letter of each name of the previous 3 companies' names, but how did y'all decide that, hey, that's going to be the name, Rev? So 2-parter. 1, leading up to the rebranding decision, and then 2, deciding on Rev being the name going forward.
Yeah, no, great question. And so I'll tell you a quick funny story, because I wish I could tell you that it was all this brilliantly mapped out process from beginning to end. And in many ways it was, but the name actually originated, I think it was late 2019, where we were having some difficulty in creating press releases or positioning ourselves in our industry across the country with our peers with all of these business names, right? And so it was very simple and convenient. Kind of make an acronym out of it and say that we're Rev Broadband, again, who's in an industry publication, or perhaps more concisely describing who we are in our press release. So that's actually the origin of it. Was not necessarily a customer facing decision. It was more about some operational concerns, industry and press releases and the like. But look, it was a conversation even prior to that, as I mentioned earlier, in terms of the legacy of the business, how it was branded, the operational aspects of the business, and the strategic aspects of where we want to be in the future. That we really kicked off, a process that, first of all, started at the ownership and board of directors level, which I just think is, critically important. That you've got to be clear about what you're solving for, or what you're trying to actually accomplish here to create value. And to your point, being very clear-eyed about what you don't want to break, right? What you don't want to put at risk. That's very, very good. So starting there at the very highest level, and then from there getting into employee surveys, focus groups. We opened up and were very transparent with our employees to ask a lot of input of how they saw the current brands and the future of the business. By the way, post-acquisition, when we came together as 3 businesses in mid to early 2019, we had a lot of time together to work through conversion issues and cultural integration and the like. So we had a relationship across these 3 businesses that, we were at a place where we could really, get that input. So from there, we really handed it off to our marketing team, who went external and worked with actually Kenny Wynn's team at 368 to start a naming process, if you will, or a name workshop that had a few components with it to kind of ideate at a high level with top contenders. Don't have executives in the room to allow them the freedom to really think creatively and eliminate, some risk-heavy names and so forth. And all of that, work being informed by a very clear strategy, cultures, value the business as they can contemplate, how we want to position the business in the future. And as you could probably imagine, there's a legal and marketing evaluation aspect, making sure trade names and URLs, websites are all available. So all of that to say, you end up at a place, or at least in our process, to where there were 5 names for consideration brought to board of directors, owners, myself, to consider. to land at this place, coincidentally back to the name all along that we had conveniently picked as something that was easier to handle in the industry publications and so forth.
So no thought of doing like sports teams do, and you let the community nominate names and pick. It could have been fun. Who knows what they would have come up with for you?
I'm afraid of what we might have gotten, but no, we absolutely, well, we did start with our employees, but we didn't open that up to the public.
No, true. So, but building on what you just said, how did you go about getting acceptance and buy-in from your employees? Because I know a lot of times, just human nature is like, well, why do we need to change? Everything's been going pretty well for nearly 100 years. Just what are we doing rocking the boat?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. In some ways, that's true, but truthfully, they were ready. So as I mentioned earlier, operating the business, particularly when these three brands again were contiguous, overlapping, really introduced some operational pain points that that the employees were quite vocal about. Like, we even had some scenarios where technicians who go into businesses to support business connectivity had three different shirts or a different wardrobe, if you will, in the truck, so they could change clothes depending on which market they were in and who they were supporting. So the employees were ready because operationally that was becoming a real challenge. Culturally, they were ready because we had spent a lot of time really post-acquisition integrating ourselves and getting through the very normal cultural competition and friction that sometimes happens when companies come together, and finding common ground and our path forward. And so we kind of had a lot of that behind us, and they were ready to say, hey, why don't we just call it what it is? We're one company, we're one team. So really, now certainly to your point, there's a lot of things. There is some spirited competition amongst the regions and what has been done really, really well for 80 plus years in each market. And so there was some nervousness around, is that going to be lost, right? Are we going to continue to be able to operate and deliver a promise to our customers? And so, again, we really engaged our employees to make sure that that was not only words, but action in terms of making that commitment, and in fact, double down in certain areas to make sure we continue to support our customers incredibly well at the local level.
And so to build on that, so as the team is meeting, the various groups are meeting, at some point, I'm assuming you come up with, okay, here are the key steps, your initiatives that really need to happen if this is going to be successful, whether those are steps that deal with, with the customer, and then there's things, I guess, as it relates to internal success steps that have to be hit, and then obviously things in the broader market when you're dealing with industry peers or what have you. But from a broad perspective, what did you guys identify as, look, if we're going to do this rebranding strategy, this is what success is going to look like?
Yeah, so at a very high level, how we thought about it is first and foremost, again, I kind of spoke to the fact that you started an ownership board of directors level, but the next step being our employees, and it needed to be an incredibly confidential matter, right? Both in the form of pre-rebranding, soliciting input, and we did that in the form of quantitative research, if you will. And as well as some focus groups. So we engaged each one of the three regions, key stakeholders in each regions, and asked lots of questions to really identify what was good and valid and valuable about those historic brands that we really, the employees saw that we need to carry forward. So that was really a first very critical step. The second is before it goes public, is to notify our customers. Once we've made that decision, now we want to, have the opportunity to communicate to our customers directly, to share with them the excitement, right, and the continued value proposition of why we've done this and what we've changed to. And then from there, obviously engaging with, PR or local publications. To your point, the industry is sort of the next step of that. And another key step was co-branding, and we're still in that period. We believe that that'll be a case. You can't take an 87-year-old brand, right, and just rip the Band-Aid off in 12 months. So there is some time where you want to continue to make that association between the legacy brand and the new brand. And that part's going incredibly well for us. But, again, that was a real key initiative we thought was critically important that we continue to invest in now.
Yeah, and to talk a little bit more specifically about, now this is about the external messaging strategy. From some of the videos that I have seen, the theme to some degree blends the rich market history and the local ties of each respective company with this sort of broader vision of improved technology and evolving services in the future. Is that the general theme of what y'all are attempting to convey?
Well, I think you said it well, and obviously we must be doing a good job for you to pick up on it that way, because that is exactly the intent behind that positioning. Again, is we wanted to get really, really clear on what was worth carrying forward and what is truly valuable in the market and recognized in the market, along with more of a forward look of how we evolve as a technology business, right? That's a little broader than, again, as I mentioned earlier, telecommunications at the core. The other thing is putting broadband at the core of what we do, which is the mechanism by which telecommunications, video, how people connect in this world, as you well know, is something that we wanted to really get across in that forward look of how we're adapting and evolving to a higher technology company. And of course, the fact that we have such a rich history with our fiber network, one of the first in the country in late 2005, 2006, something we're very, very proud of. We wanted that to fit within the brand positioning of a high-tech company based right here in Louisiana, right? So yeah, it sounds like you picked up on that messaging really well and said it well, because that's precisely how we wanted to strike that balance in the market.
So going back a little bit inside, as this process was rolling out, whether it be as you were game planning and strategizing the execution strategy, or as things started to roll out, were there any unanticipated obstacles that you faced? And if so, how did you sort of try to adjust them on the fly without disrupting the greater flow of what was trying to be achieved?
Well, there's a big one, and that was Hurricane Ida of about a little over a year ago. And seriously, we had plans to launch the brand, right around or shortly thereafter when Hurricane Ida made landfall. And so clearly, from an operational, resource management standpoint, it was an easy decision to say, hey, we've got to put this off for a bit. The other is, look, we don't ever want to be tone deaf in the market, right? To push forward with a project like that, that is about our history, our brand, and of course the promise it makes to our customers while people are displaced from their homes. And so we rolled up our sleeves and wanted to be very, very focused on restoring and helping our community. So that, honestly, that was the biggest obstacle that we faced in terms of the launching point of the brand. And so that, that put us, I want to say 4 or 5 months, thereafter into the year, earlier this year, to effectively overcome that obstacle.
One of the things that strikes me is sort of how many little things go into an initiative like this, whether it be the filing of business and tax documents, internal system integrations, to even changing stationery and billing statements. So how did you all sort of divide up the responsibility or sort of timeline? Because like building a house, there's a lot more things that end up on that punch list than simply put up the walls, put in the windows, put in the front door, and let's go.
Yeah, no, great point. And much like, building a house, there are surprises, right? And things that maybe you didn't think about. And look, in our business, gosh, it was just amazing. I mean, we knew it, but when we took inventory of the assets that we have out there in the form of a fleet of trucks and vans and, bucket trucks and so forth, as well as signage, not just in the form of outdoor advertising on billboards, but also, signs at schools and other community partners in the area. It's just an enormous amount of assets out in the marketplace. Our marketing team, truthfully, in taking the lead on that, and a lot of this project, by the way, was handled internally, outside of just the process of name selection. Our team just did an amazing job. And that's really where they shined, is to come up with a very thorough sequence of work streams that they needed to both identify where the assets are, what we need to change, put a budget behind that, put plans behind that, and how we would actually go out and execute. We are fortunate that we have a project management function in the business that's quite mature and has been around for many years. And so that, this definitely was a nice fit. We don't do all of our work through the project management function, but this was clearly an opportunity to leverage that. And so that team as well really helped us do an amazing job to really execute all of those details like you mentioned.
Well, and as all that was unfolding, was there a moment where you felt like, okay, momentum seems to be on our side, and it looks like everything's going to sort of ultimately play out the way we wanted it to? So I guess in short, was there sort of an aha moment as this process was playing out where you felt pretty good about it?
Yes, I mean, and there are several, but I think one that really stands out for me is, so we have this customer survey tool that we have in place for about a year and a half now, and in part was put in place because we wanted to make sure we really get a good sense of what our customers think and what they have to say about us. And so effectively, it's a net promoter score type of engine where they click how likely they are to refer you to a friend. Or a business partner and the like, and so and we score very, very high in that area. It also affords them the opportunity to comment, and so we get a lot of comments. And when I started to see the pattern, and our team saw the pattern that people were mentioning Rev in their comments and with a positive association, right? You could tell that in their mind we transitioned. In their mind, at least, with that customer, from eTel to Rev or RTC to Rev, Vision to Rev. And so that really, really felt good. Also saw the same thing, in person at events where we even now, but early on, 6 months ago, had people approach us seeing maybe a tent at a golf, a golf fundraiser or sponsorship or whatever, where they come in and say, oh yeah, you were formerly eTel, right? And now Rev. And so, again, those are some aha moments that, again, sort of gives us the energy we need to keep going and keep doing what we're doing, because it's not only been that it's been, associating that name from legacy brand to new, but it's also been a very positive association.
Well, if everything always got 100% acceptance, it would always be a Merry Christmas. So, so I'm kind of wondering, certainly somewhere along the way, I'm assuming some clients or customers said, hey, what are you doing? I'll just use eTel, for example. It's been eTel going back to my great grandfather or great grandmother. So what are we doing all this for? And so as people may have raised concerns or questions, and maybe it wasn't even about the name, it may have just been, is my service going to stay the same, or what's going on here? How did you guys sort of address all that?
Yeah, so you're correct. Not everything goes perfectly right, and we did get some questions from clients, both in the residential and the business segment of the business. The biggest one we heard, and I think the most common, was there was an assumption out there that we had sold the business, some much larger business, to someone out of state. And we think in some ways we did a very nice, elegant job with the logo and the design and the advertisement, that it almost is, Madison Avenue-esque, if you will, that didn't feel to maybe some of our customers that was a local company. Number one, it was new, perhaps they hadn't heard of it. And then secondarily, just, the quality we're really shooting for. So that was the biggest one. A little bit along the same lines, sometimes people, if something happens with their network connectivity, and that's another world that's not perfect, right? We strive for a very, very high standard, but occasionally fiber is cut or service goes out for a period of time. We respond to that. Some people would associate that trouble ticket with a name change, of the business. See, I told you they sold to this company in New York, and here you go. Now my internet's been out for 10 minutes. Really how we've overcome that, and again, I think the team's done an amazing job, is number one, going back to including employees, which, by the way, when we launched the brand internally, we designated ambassadors from each region who had a history with that business to be a part of the messaging internally. So it's not just coming from me from the mountaintop, but really organically amongst them as peers. And so what that did and accomplished is it gave all employees the confidence and buy-in that when they hear those types of comments at a soccer game, right, because they live and work in the community and they know someone may be asking, who's this company, what's this all about, they could very, positively talk about and reinforce, what we're trying to do. And so, again, just another area I'm very, very proud is we're overcoming some of those very natural and expected objections because, all employees just, culturally are very much behind that transition.
As a quick aside, the key should have been to locals that this was not an outside sale, was none of the marketing campaigns had banjos, fiddles, or swamp scenes. It was all sort of
right.
much more forward-thinking, progressive sort of a deal. But as I have listened to you talk about this, in many ways, this rebranding strategy, and maybe because some of it dealt with, bringing three distinct entities under a singular umbrella, but I think a lot of parallels can be had to, if a company does change hands, and I'll be specific about, where I work, where for 20 plus years, it was Rolf McCollister and Julio Malera. And then, a year ago, Rolf decides to retire. And so, on one level, it seems real easy. Julio's going to take over the company and you think nothing's going to change. But then you realize not only is there maybe some changes in direction, but more importantly, there's a whole nother way where you've got to sort of brand yourself that while things are still the same in many respects, there is a change that is taking place. So I'm wondering if now that you've been through this, do you sort of see maybe some parallels between rebranding and what happens when a company sort of changes within ownership?
Parallels in terms of just companies being faced with that sort of decision, is this the right time or?
Yeah, and it just seems like, you guys did a rebranding for our company, for example, was forced into, I don't know if it's rebranding, but it sort of had to reintroduce itself that basically, hey, it's still the same old business report, but now instead of being powered by Rolf and Julio, it's Malera Enterprises. And so, again, there's a lot of internal things you got to do. I mean, just for us, payroll changes were unique in terms of the system and tax IDs and things of that nature. But on a broader perspective, I just see that there appears to be a lot of similarities to what you guys went through to had there been a partnership change of an ownership of any kind of small business.
Yeah, no. So that helps. Thank you. I think there's a couple things to think about, and it's not obviously a one size fits all. Every business is in a unique place in their evolution, and their history, and also where they want to be in the future, right? In terms of how they think about their brand. There's an expression that branding is an input and brand is an output, right? And I would extend that to say the same is true about the inputs related to your values, your strategy, your culture, what it is you deliver and promise to your customers. All of that's got to be very, very clear of what it is today and what you aspire for it to be in the future before really there's any thought put around calling it something different, right? Or repositioning it in a different way until you can really sort of put your money where your mouth is. So that's definitely something I'd encourage any business to think about is, look, we're all going through change and an evolution where we are, disruptive times within our industry or the economy. And we shouldn't, rush to say, okay, that means we got to reposition ourselves in the market until first those inputs are very, very clear. And also because it is transition, it's a transition in nature to say, what do we want to be in the future? There's got to be a balance there too, in terms of, am I going to be able to live up to how I'm positioning myself in the market and how I'm going to brand that enterprise?
And I'm sure that would sort of factor into what you see as sort of the key tips for any other entity or business out there that is looking to either rebrand, reposition, or just sort of wants to reintroduce themselves into the market. Or are there other tips that you might say now that we've been through this? I would also remind people to consider these things as well.
Yeah, no, yeah, absolutely. Again, in our case, if there's a long history, and particularly with the employees, if there's long retention and years of service with employees, I think it makes a lot of sense. And for us, we were very, very determined to include our employees in the conversation, hear what they have to say, get that feedback, and sort of take your time to go through that process and not rush through it, because that's ultimately what's going to drive alignment. So I think that's certainly a real key to success. And the other is just not take a rip the Band-Aid off approach, that there's a patient game there as it relates to brand messaging. We're still tweaking that. There's still some things that post-launch we say, hey, you know what, I'm not sure we got that quite to where we want it to be. We want to position ourselves or a product perhaps in slightly a different way than how we came out the blocks with this. So being a bit nimble and iterative also, I think, is something that is important to keep in mind.
Well, Josh, look, I thank you.
Thank you for letting us tell our story. It's a real pleasure, and happy to see you. So thank you, JR.
And thanks also to you, our viewers, who made the time to join us today, as well as our sponsors, the East Baton Rouge Parish Library and Home Bank. Please join us in April for another edition of Strictly Business. I'll see you then.